What is up, my people? Welcome back to another episode of the Sacred Giggle podcast. My guest on the show today is Suket Karnawat. Suket and I actually met at a party at the end of last year in 2021. And very serendipitously, we were introduced by a mutual friend. And Suket started telling me about his story. And I was just fascinated. Here's a guy who is extremely intelligent, worked super hard, got a great job at Google, worked there for a bunch of years, got a bunch of promotions, and started realizing that he just wasn't fulfilled. He wanted to do something more meaningful. He wanted to do something more impactful. He wanted to be his own boss, but he wasn't exactly sure what that was. So he jumped ship. He left what many would consider to be a gold mine of jobs at Google and jumped straight into the unknown. And since then, he has started his own company called the Moai, which he describes as a gym for habit formation. It's an online platform where you can join a community of like-minded people to hold you accountable in creating new, healthier habits and cultivating the life that you want through those habits. And their business model is really something unique and remarkable. So whereas a lot of these kinds of platforms and companies have a business model where you have to donate money if you don't succeed in your habit, and that's actually how they make all their revenue, the Moai has a slightly different business model. Suket realized that if he's just going to be monetizing off of people not reaching their goals, then the whole revenue strategy for the company is kind of out of alignment with the purpose of the company, right? Which is for people to maintain and keep and cultivate healthy habits. So instead, he has built a really innovative model where you can sign up for free, and if you don't achieve your habit, the money goes to a charity of your choice. And once your course is finished, you can choose to donate. And that's the current business strategy of the Moai, which I think is really admirable. And Suket is just a really fascinating guy. He, like me, has an almost identical story of how he got into meditation by jumping headfirst into a 10-day Vipassana retreat. So you'll hear us share kindred bonded stories about that. And I just really respect how in alignment he is and how in integrity he is in the way that he looks at his life and the way that he looks at his career. So if you are somebody who's trying to figure out your purpose, trying to figure out a way to do something that's more true to your soul, your calling, definitely check out this episode with Suket. He's an inspiring guy. And without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation. So, Suket, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Ashish, how you doing?
Doing well. I'm here in Mexico, and I know, if I'm not mistaken, you are weathering the cold over there in New York.
Yeah, actually today is like a gorgeous day. It honestly feels like summer. I just stepped out for like a little bike ride right before this to like pick up a book from the library, but it made me realize like how much I miss the sun. I do like the seasons, but it's just like so energizing to just be out and like just like kind of sunbask. I was like doing that for a little bit today before some important meetings. It was a good time to recharge, honestly.
I feel that for sure. And I know for myself, it can be so easy to lose track of the importance of just being outside. I mean, I'm in Mexico. I'm in a tropical Caribbean paradise right now in Tulum. And even here, I get so caught up with work. I get so into my zone on my computer, like just that contracted, like hunched over your laptop kind of vibe. And sometimes I walk outside and I'm like, God, I got to get out here and live, you know? And I think especially as people like us, and I think a lot of people that listen to the show are either living this lifestyle already or sort of aspiring to, or at least interested in it. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't really enjoy the guests that I have on, which is that, you know, people that just work for themselves, like entrepreneurs, artists, people that make our own hours. And I know for you, you know, I want to get into your whole story because you had what I think everybody in society would consider a really great job and situation at Google. And you left to start your own company, I think about a year ago now, maybe a little over a year ago. So I'd love to kind of take it back to, you know, what that decision was like as we talk about, you know, being our own bosses and the pros and cons that come with that.
So yeah, I basically joined Google right after I graduated college. And kind of, as you said, it was like for a lot of people, it was a dream job. And I think, you know, I kind of bought into that Kool-Aid also because everyone was telling me like I couldn't do any better. I mean, not in like a bad way, but just like, oh, this is like kind of the pinnacle. So, you know, I was like, oh, I made it. Great. But I felt like the feeling of being unfulfilled sunk in pretty quickly, honestly. But then, that kind of gets diluted by like, you get a little distracted by the whole rat race that's going on. So then you get busy in all these promos and you kind of hope that that's what will drive you forward. But then that happens and you're like, oh, well, I'm still as unfulfilled. Like, what should I do? So for me, it was like kind of a long process of like, I always had this kind of feeling that I wanted to leave and that this wasn't really the path for me. But it took me a couple of years to actually gather the courage and the conviction that I could survive on my own. So yeah, I mean, like I quit after like 4.5 years. And I mean, funnily enough, like I didn't even quit to start a business. Like I knew that eventually that's something that I probably wanted to do. But my whole theory was that if I just focus on a set of foundational healthy habits, which is, like exercise, meditation, just health and happiness and effectiveness, essentially, if I focused on those, then everything else in my life would kind of come together. And I felt like I didn't get enough time while I was at work to really focus on those things. So yeah, I just decided to take the plunge and I was like, you know what? I have the resources to not work for a little bit. Let me just like focus on myself and, see where that leads me. And that kind of organically led me into like the business that I'm running right now. So it's definitely an interesting story. Like I didn't plan for it at all. I just kind of trusted that I would put my energy out there and the world would respond. And that's exactly what happened. It's funny how that works.
It's such a beautiful example of surrendering to the universe and trusting in prioritizing what feels good and what feels nourishing and what feels fulfilling to you. I mean, I think even your story about the way that you left without necessarily having a plan, it's like even in entrepreneurship circles, or I talk to a lot of artists who are getting advice about when's the right time to quit. A very common thing we hear is, well, don't quit until you are at least making the same income from your side hustle that you're making at work. Like that's a common trope that we hear. Or you got to have a plan. Don't just quit and just throw it to the wind, so to speak. And I think the intention behind that advice is meaningful and helpful and productive in the sense that it's sort of stopping people from completely not having a plan whatsoever. But I think it's still kind of this outside in orientation where it's like, I need to find security from somewhere else outside there in the world that is going to then buffer me quitting my job and make me feel more safe. And the paradox is that's probably why you got that job in the first place, is because you were thinking that it would give you some security and stability. And now it's like by not feeling fulfilled at that job, life is trying to teach us this lesson that you got to figure out how to cultivate that sense of stability and security and purpose from within. And then people kind of will quit their job, but then they'll oftentimes, I think that's where that advice comes from. It's still coming from this subtle place of fear and not feeling fully able to commit to being in the unknown, to be totally honest. And so I really commend you for doing that. I mean, I knew that I wanted to do music and stuff, but when I quit, I didn't have anything going for me in terms of my music or my art or anything. It was really just a recognition of the way that I'm living right now is not fundamentally satisfying to me at a soul level. And from a macro level, if I just zoom out, like this is not how I want to be spending my life. And that really should take priority over everything. But I think, it can be difficult to surrender to that unknown. Did you find that was a challenge? I mean, I know that you mentioned that you had been considering leaving for a long time. So, I mean, was it sort of a gradual mustering up of courage? Was there a single moment where you're like, like in the movies where you're just like, that's it, the last straw? Yeah. What was that process like?
I'd say it was mostly gradual for me. I mean, there were like definitely a few moments that I remember, but not a single moment that I was like, okay, you know what, I have to drop everything. I think I was slowly kind of, as I felt unsatisfied, I was exploring. I mean, it was a long process of debugging, right? Like why I was unhappy. And I was testing out some hypotheses and slowly kind of invalidating them. So like one was like, oh, like maybe I'm not growing fast enough in my career. And I was like, okay, maybe the promotion is going to solve this. But I got promoted and that didn't do it. Okay, maybe it's the job role that I had. So I switched from being a software engineer to a product manager. I mean, I liked that job a lot better. I loved it, but it still wasn't like it. That feeling was still there of like unfulfillment. And then I explored like other opportunities outside of Google as well. But, nothing really felt right. And I just, as I kept like kind of eliminate, like I honestly think life is just a process of elimination. Like you try different things and like things don't work. Like it's much harder to find the thing that works than it is to like find the thing that doesn't. You know, you have to keep trying and, you know, keep ruling things out. And that's part of the process. And I think that demotivates people a little bit. But like for me, it's you're a step closer to figuring out what you want. Like a kind of negative result is still good in a way, right? It's definitive that this isn't the thing. So you should move on.
Just quickly to jump in there, I completely agree. Do you feel like in your experience, it's always been super definitive? Because I know for myself, I mean, I could not agree more about this idea that, you know, if you just keep trying things and you eliminate things and you get more and more specific, and then eventually maybe you'll land on something that's some weird, unique combination of all these different things that only you could do. And it's very unique to you. Like that's kind of how I feel like my journey is going right now. But I also know sometimes I doubt myself. I doubt even my own ability to ascertain whether something is fulfilling me, because sometimes it can be hard to be a judge of what truly is making us happy, you know, like because there's so much of it is our conditioning and things put into our head by other people. Have you experienced that in terms of, you know, but through this process of elimination, trying to figure out what is and isn't for me?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understood like that. I mean, I guess the short answer is like no, it's never like 100% definitive. But I think that's where your instinct comes in. Is like you typically have a feeling whether something is right or not, and of course, like I mean, it's really hard to separate your your instinct from like all the other emotions that you're feeling, like the fear and the rationality and all that stuff. But I think of it as bets, right? Rather than kind of having a maybe like definitive course of action, you're making bets on what is important to you, what step you need to take. And like the way I judge my decisions is like knowing what I knew then, like would I have made the same bet? And so like it may not work out, but like you have to kind of take a chance on something always. So I mean, I agree with you that there's always this uncertainty and you're always kind of battling that. But at some point, I mean, just like kind of your point about like surrendering to the universe, I think to some extent you have to surrender to this uncertainty as well, because it's always going to exist. Like that will never, I think, fully disappear. I think that's just something you have to become comfortable with. And it's a hard thing to become comfortable with, but actually luckily some of my like job training helped in that. Like that's literally like that's the art of product management, like making the ambiguous unambiguous, like really eliminating ambiguity. So, but it's also accepting, that everything will be to some extent ambiguous.
Right. And I think it's funny, I think your engineering sort of background really has influenced even the way that you left Google and the way you were describing, if I can just create a set of foundational habits to start to change my reality from the inside out rather than trying to figure out what the answer is outside of me. If I can create a set of foundational habits and stick to them, then that will create a system in which I will naturally find my purpose or find the thing that fulfills me. And I think that's it's a very intelligent and almost like engineering way of approaching doing something as seemingly spontaneous or nebulous as quitting your job and not knowing what's coming next. So I think even within the mystery of that surrender to the universe that you did by leaving Google, you sort of had this sort of built-in system in place. And maybe that's a good way to segue into the Moai, because, I had never heard you describe that was the way that you're thinking about it. And you've described to me the Moai as basically being a habit gym. So yeah, explain to the people what the Moai is. And maybe before we get into kind of like what the actual platform is, sort of that period between when you left your job, started implementing all these habits, and then where did the seed for the Moai first originate? How did it begin to grow?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Like I have a very like kind of engineering mindset when it comes to my decisions. I'm not a very like spontaneous person. I'm a planner, right? I like kind of think very hard about like the actions I'm going to take and what consequences are going to have, like what first order, what second order consequences, and like really kind of simulating all of that before I actually set out and actually do anything. And I realized like that just wasn't a good attitude. It just wasn't the most effective way to, I think, like yield results. Like at the end of the day, your mental model of the real world can only get so accurate. The way that you have to test your model is by constantly having it collide with reality by running experiments, by actually doing something, seeing how like things actually unfold, and then kind of refining your mental model that way. I had kind of like planned my whole life up until I quit. And I mean, you're right that it was a very kind of calculated decision. Like I thought pretty hard about like, okay, like what's my downside? My downside is really my opportunity cost. Like, yeah, I don't have the Google salary, but I mean, a little bit about my background. I mean, I live at home with my parents and I don't really have any like serious monthly expenses. I had a ton of money saved up because I had been living at home and, I don't have any ongoing expenses. So I have a long runway and this risk kind of made sense to me. But yeah, when I quit, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to leave this open and like I know roughly that I want to build a set of habits, but I don't know what those habits are. And I'm going to try stuff and experiment. So the approach that I had was essentially like, I really believe in experimenting with extremes. So like I had never really kind of delved into like meditation, for example, before. Like the most I had done was Headspace, like these 10-minute meditations every like maybe few days. And I never kind of made a habit out of it, partly because I feel like I didn't like really see significant value from it. But, I decided to kind of throw myself in completely by attending a 10-day silent course that teaches you one specific practice of meditation, which is called Vipassana. That was actually like a really kind of like pivotal moment for me, and it inspired a lot of the things that I ended up doing after. And, I can talk to that like in more detail, but essentially like, I went to this 10-day course where all you're doing is you're really just like eating, meditating, and sleeping. You're meditating for 10 hours a day for 10 days, complete silence. You don't have your phone. You're completely off grid, not connected to the outside world. And, that took me to one extreme of like, okay, what is it like to meditate every day? What benefits do you observe from actually doing that? And once you understand both extremes of a life without meditation and a life of, let's say, complete meditation, then you can kind of find the middle ground where you're like, okay, like what are the benefits that I really kind of feel are worth investing my time in? And for me, meditation was so important that I've chosen to continue the practice after I finished that program. And, similarly, I did stuff like that with exercise, with my diet, with sleep, with journaling. I ran these like little experiments where I would do something, to an extreme, like really kind of like go all out, investing in something, really kind of building that habit and seeing what results I would get. And then kind of finding a like nice little sweet spot in the middle between value and effort, because it's not really sustainable for me to just like, I mean, unless like I'm retired, I can't just exercise, meditate, and eat well all day, right? I have to do something to earn a living. But that basically morphed into the Moai because I realized that for me, the secret was like really experimenting with something and on a regular basis, just reflecting on what that experience was like what benefits did I see? What was challenging about it? How can I do better next time? And that just created this like really beautiful feedback loop where I'm just constantly improving because I'm reflecting on my experience and I'm being intentional about what I want to do.
Yeah, perfect, man. So much beautiful stuff there to react to. And first thing I want to say, I don't know if we had talked about this, but your story of how you got into meditation is almost identical to mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's crazy. Like when I was hearing your story, I was like, I have told this exact story to so many people. And I've told this exact story multiple times on this podcast. Almost exactly the same. I didn't meditate at all. Started feeling super socially anxious and was, reading about it, wasn't really like bought into meditation at all or anything spiritual for that matter. And then I was like, okay, I'm just going to try this out. So it's exactly to the T. Like I downloaded Headspace, tried a couple sessions, they're like 10 minutes long. The guy, Andy, talks to you in his nice calming voice. And I did that for a bit and I was like, okay, interesting. But this seems like the starter pack of meditation sort of. So then I was like, I'm just kind of also a very extreme person. So I just signed up for a 10-day Vipassana with Goenka's school, Dhamma.org. And maybe that's the one you did as well.
Yeah.
And went to Massachusetts, to Barrie, Massachusetts in summer of 2016. I was 26. Yeah, like almost zero prior meditation experience. And I just jump headfirst into the deepest end of the pool. And yeah, man, same exact thing. And I remember it really also changed my experience. And that was the pivotal moment for me turning vegetarian, for example. Like I had been wanting to try for a while before, but I had never felt like, I was like, I don't know if I could give up meat for even a week because I loved meat so much. And I went to Vipassana and obviously it's all vegetarian there. And I came back and I just never ate meat again after that. So that started me on that path from a health perspective and a spiritual perspective. And it totally started my spiritual path too. And, since then, I've sat other silent retreats. I've studied a lot of different lineages, Zen Buddhism, Tibetan meditation. And I've also had long periods in my life where I wasn't meditating and seen the effects of that and seen how my mind becomes way less settled. And then I've tried other things like breath work and kind of settled on this now, 6 years after that initial pivotal experience. I kind of have like my own very custom personalized daily routine that I try to do every morning that's very specific to me, and it's a result of me putting myself through all those different extremes and experiences. And same with fasting, and like I intermittent fast, but I've tried 3-day fasts and seen the experience of that. So yeah, it's just funny to hear a story. It's very similar, and I think the reason I love the Moai so much is this accountability piece that you've added on to the platform, which I think is so crucial to making something so stick so that it is actually a habit and it's not just some crazy thing you did that one time and then you go back to your life and you just kind of conceptually can tell people about it, but you're not necessarily living it and walking the walk. So I want to talk about the accountability piece, but just one more thing that you said that stuck out to me was, you mentioned, well, I can't just meditate and eat healthy and do that for like, I have to make a living. And yes, that's true. And I've also noticed in my own experience that I do believe that a fundamental piece of living a truly holistic, good life is service to others. Like those of us who can be lucky enough, and lucky is not the right word. I think it's just skillful and intentional enough to align our vocation and our occupation that makes us money with something that is of service to others, can really experience the benefits of that as if it is a daily practice. Like, what would it be like to look at your work not as something that you have to do so that you can make money, so that then in your free time you can meditate and do all the things that you really want to do? But what would it be like to look at your occupation, your work, as just an extension of your daily habits, your daily practice? And, I've really started to think about everything that I do through that lens, like music. It's like a spiritual practice to connect to something bigger than myself and transmit an emotion and help people feel like they're not alone. And hopefully, if I'm doing it well and maximizing my potential as a musician and as an artist, do what my favorite songs did for me, So it's interesting to just reframe things that way. But I want to get back to the Moai and talk about, just kind of explain to people how it works, why you feel that the accountability piece is important, because I know that that's big engine of the platform.
Yeah. Well, first of all, like, a lot of things that I also want to react to. Like, it's funny, I went to that same exact Vipassana course, like the one in Massachusetts. I did that when I was 26 years old.
Wait,
yeah.
Sorry, are we the same age? I'm 31.
No. I just did it. Like, I just turned 27. So
I did that.
I
was gonna say, like, if we were at the same one at the same time, that'd be crazy.
That would be surreal.
Okay, so like, that's crazy. So those grounds, those walks that you take for 5 minutes in between the sessions, or you can't wait to get up and go for a walk because it's the most exciting part of your day, or like you eat your apple for like an hour because it's the one time you're eating food. Like, yeah, the whole vibes.
Yeah, I definitely want to take actually like a few minutes to talk about that, because I think it's been such a like kind of foundational. Honestly, like I'm just obsessed with like the organization. Like when you talk about living in an aligned way, in a holistic way, and being authentic, that organization stands for all of those things in a way that I had never seen before. And it just made me like want to create something like that. Like there's like so many aspects about it that are just, I think, just so beautiful. Like the first thing is like that these programs are completely free. The lodging, the food, the teaching, every single thing, you're there for 10 days. The accommodations are great. The food is fantastic. Like the course itself is amazing, and it's all completely free. And at the end, only if you benefited and only if you want to pay it forward can you donate. The coolest thing about it to me is that unless you complete this 10-day course, you can't donate money to this organization. So it's not like they have some wealthy, like big donors that like don't really know what it's about. You have to really be invested in this thing, in this very non-commercial thing, something that's genuinely like a service to others, bigger than you, bigger than all of us. It was just like, I don't know, like it was one of the most like kind of most aligned organizations that I've ever seen, where there's no other purpose than helping people. Like the incentives don't work out any other way unless they care about, actually transmitting this practice to other people.
100%. And it's really true about that organization. And if people are curious, It's Dhamma.org, Dhamma.org is the Vipassana practice, the organization that is setting up these Vipassana practice centers all over the world, honestly. I mean, there's centers literally in like every country, all over the States, all over India. And it was originated by a Burmese meditation master named Goenka. But the organization itself is really, I agree, it's one of the highest integrity organizations I've come across. And since then, I've sat retreats with really amazing Zen practitioners and organizations like Zen Mountain Monastery in upstate New York. I've sat a couple of retreats there. I've been blessed to study with a lot of great masters and different healers and different modalities. And I've still to this day have not come across any organization that's like, they literally don't charge. It's kind of insane. It just doesn't make any sense from a business perspective. And the ironic thing is that they make a lot of money because they have, and then that money goes back to constructing new centers, repairing, doing repairs, keeping the lights on, so to speak. But I remember, there was a guy that sat with me on my first Vipassana who is, he's like a partner at some hedge fund in New York, really wealthy guy. And he does a 10-day like every year. And I mean, he's one of their biggest benefactors, and it's just completely anonymous donation. So it really is an amazing organization. And I had no idea that was sort of part of the inspiration for the Moai. So yeah, I'd love to sort of get more into that. We definitely need to talk more about just Vipassana in general, maybe offline or another conversation on the show.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that just so that I can like set the stage for the Moai, because I shamelessly stole a lot of the Vipassana principles in designing this program. So I was kind of talking about experimentation and making sure you're being intentional about your reflection and, trying new things, reflecting on what worked and what didn't, and, kind of just continuing that feedback loop. Yeah, you try something, you learn, you apply those learnings, and you continue. I think what was cool about Vipassana is that, you're there for 10 days, you're physically there, it's hard for you to drop out. But if I'm creating a service for people to actually build habits in a very kind of like asynchronous way on your own, I needed some hook to keep people really accountable to investing in themselves, because life is busy and, we all get caught up in busy work, and sometimes we forgo the important for what's urgent. It's really, I think, important to, take that time out for literally the most important things. And I think, reflecting on your week and your biggest goals and, the direction that you're trying to move is really important. That's essentially how the Moai works. Is every single week you can set a challenge for yourself, whatever that challenge is. Like, that's really kind of personal. It depends on what are the things that you care about in your life. And at the end of the week, when you like kind of try to follow that challenge, you have to submit this essentially guided reflection that helps you understand, what went well, what didn't go well. And, not in a way like, I regret not doing this, or I regret doing this, but like what didn't go well, so you can debug the problem and you can figure out what to do better next time. I'm really big on this belief of like just data is power. I think this is like kind of the engineering mindset, right? Like, be very kind of rational and objective and dispassionate about your mistakes. Like the secret to success is in your mistakes, is in your setbacks. You really need to understand why you have those setbacks to actually kind of put a plan in place to address them. So like being very kind of open about what are my failures and how can I do better next time. I thought that was a really important loop to encourage. A lot of like similar accountability platforms that I'd seen have a few issues that I wanted to address. The first issue is like they focus way too much on the outcome. And I think just what I've learned from my experimentation is that life just comes in the way. And it's really not worth me beating myself up over like, I told myself I'll go to the gym 3 times this week, but I only went 2 times. So I'm going to like, just like kind of hate myself for it. That's not very productive. And it creates this really bad, vicious cycle of, you feel shitty about it and then you cope by like through some other distractions. And then that habit just slips, right? So I think really the important part is not like whether or not you achieve that outcome, but whether or not you're really reflecting on what happened and why it happened and how you can do better, like kind of just having a very like rational approach to that. The other aspect that other accountability platforms do is the way that they make money is they'll have a penalty, for example, for you not completing something. That's basically their source of revenue.
Right.
So that creates this really like weird conflict of interest where they're technically incentivized for you to fail. And I mean, obviously you won't keep using the platform if like you keep failing, or maybe you won't, I don't know. But like just kind of inspired by Vipassana, this whole like aligned incentives aspect of like, I want my interest and your interest as a user to just be aligned, and I want to support you on that process. So how the Moai is different is when you fail, you're charged money, but that money goes to charity, not to me. So at the end of the day, I don't profit off of someone's failure, but I can still hold people accountable.
It's really interesting how you picked up on that, with all these platforms that's how they're making their money is through people not achieving the thing that they're purporting that they're about, which is to help people build habits. And I think, the Vipassana sort of angle and principles that you took makes a lot of sense, and it's very admirable. I really respect it. And I think that's why I met you and learned about the Moai last year. It really caught my attention, something that I would love to implement in my future stuff. I'm curious, with this sort of model that's derived from Vipassana, when you were sort of inspired to have this and actually have this business model, like you said, at the end of the day, also got to make money, also got to monetize, you're coming from probably a really good cushy salary at Google, there's certain quality of life that you may or may not want. How did you reconcile those two things in terms of the growth? Or is that still an ongoing process? I know for myself that when I left my corporate job to do something more in alignment with myself, it meant not making nearly as much money and also not in any sort of stable way, at least for the first few years, which I'm definitely still in. And I sort of just, again, like to borrow from your engineering process, I sort of just did the calculus in my head and realized, well, this is what I value. I value my freedom more and living in alignment more and being able to wake up and do what I want and create. So in a similar way, it sounds like with the Moai, you have this strong value that you're placing on being a really aligned organization and not having these conflicting incentives. What is the process like of sort of seeing the path forward for that and then making that hold hands with creating a profitable business?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something I spend a lot of time thinking about, and I know you do as well. In your kind of the music, like the entire universe and ecosystem that you're trying to create. So yeah, I mean, I think the way I think about it is like I think it was nice for me to copy a lot of things from Vipassana, but at the end of the day, Vipassana is a nonprofit organization. I'm a corporation. So there have to be some differences. Oh, and I guess like something I didn't mention is like the programs in the Moai. Yeah, like I do make money from them right now, but I make money on a pay what you want basis. So you go through the program, you maybe if you fail, you're charged money to charity. But if you succeed and you found that it was worth it, you can choose to donate to me. First of all, I think what's interesting is that most people choose to donate. I'm making a very small amount of money right now, but like it's definitely promising. I could see this being a valid business model. I'm not kind of betting everything on that, but it's definitely in the realm of possibility. But kind of going back to the philosophy of why pay what you want is important. So it's, again, Vipassana has this thing called experiential understanding, this principle of experiential understanding. So the idea is that why you pay what you want at the end is that until you actually experience something, not just like read about it or learn about it, but like actually kind of viscerally experience it, a process, and kind of observe benefits. Only then can you really make a true judgment about whether it's worth it or not. In the spirit of that, I can make the first program pay what you want. But after that, once people have understood what this program is about and what the potential is, there are opportunities, I think, for me to charge on an ongoing basis. So long story short, I'm still experimenting, but I think there are a lot of like possible ways that this can go that I think can really like have this be a corporation that at the end of the day is aligned with the users. I obviously want to make a service that makes money, but I want to do something that helps people and they feel good about using the service and they feel like I'm kind of their champion, right? That I'm really like supporting them. And so I think even having a subscription fee doesn't really kind of eliminate that aspect of it, of like the aligned incentives, because I still don't make money if they fail. I think that's really the key part.
Yeah, I mean, I agree because, if your value as a company was that you were a nonprofit, then those incentives would not be aligned to charge a subscription fee probably. But that's not the value of the company. That's, as you mentioned, where it differs from Dhamma.org, from the Vipassana organization, is that you are a corporation. And I think this is really important to touch on because I think a lot of people that are, and I know this because I'm this person, a lot of my followers and the people that listen to this show, artists, healers, people that are trying to make a difference, people that are trying to be of service, who place a higher value, or not even higher, but at the very least, an equal value on having a positive impact to just making a bunch of money. And I think for a lot of people, depending on their mindsets around money, which, many people just don't have the healthiest mindsets around money. How often have we heard money is the root of all evil, or, you can't trust like rich people, or the suspicion around billionaires and all that stuff, without getting into a whole political conversation. But I think just the way that people's beliefs around money are jiggered, especially people who are in this sort of more service oriented mentality, you can almost feel this guilt or shame for trying to charge for something that should be so, as if it makes it somewhat like less pure, or less your intentions less holier than thou if you're charging. And I know for artists, we really start like with music. If I think about the emotional impact that one of my songs has on someone, like there's no reason that I shouldn't feel very comfortable wanting to monetize that, because I am providing so much value to them. And in the same way with the Moai, if you're providing this set of accountability in this community of people to grow and become better versions of themselves, like how is that less valuable than a bank figuring out ways to make money out of its money, more money out of its money? Nothing against, not shitting on banks right now, but maybe a little. But that whole concept, I think it's so important for people to really step into this paradigm of it's okay for it to be to make money. And not only is it okay, I'm actually doing an injustice. The service is actually not being done justice to if I try to maintain this wholly pure mentality that it's not about money. Unless you are an organization like Dhamma, like we discussed, where their express stated mission is to help people and it's a nonprofit. But if you are trying to make money and make a living, just to have that mentality that I am providing a service and people get compensated for providing services. And this is a service just like any other, I think is really important. So I'm happy that you're considering the subscription fee, whether or not you go down that route or it's a tiered model. I think it's really important for people to think about things in that way and start reimagine what is actually valuable, what is actually worth someone's money. The last thing I'll say is I think the fact that people are donating is all the evidence that you need, right?
Yeah, I think you really hit on something that I've seen as a very pervasive attitude of like, yeah, the second I charge money for something, it just becomes corrupt. But that doesn't have to be true. I mean, I know that there are people that believe that, but like, I think I'm in the camp of like the middle ground. I think similar to you, where, I mean, money is a useful tool. And, it's a way that, I mean, people vote with their dollar and people pay for what's valuable to them. And if you can provide something of value, then there's no reason that you should hesitate from charging money. And I mean, I actually like take it a step further. Like I actually want to charge money because I want to compete with the other services that are out there where I feel that their incentives are not aligned. So like, if I truly feel that what I have is better, then I want it to be as big as possible. And I want to charge money for it, because I also feel like people's attitude towards nonprofit things is different than when they kind of consume products. I think people have this almost like, I think, hesitation to deal with a lot of nonprofit things. I don't know why it is. I'd rather kind of be competing with the other corporations out there and really being like, look, I'm providing just as much value as everyone else, and I'm doing it in an ethical way. And I think that's like a surefire like recipe for success, right? Like, why would anyone not want to do this?
100%. And also, when people have skin in the game, they take the product more seriously. They take the service more seriously. Like, right? If somebody is, for example, imagine you sign up for an online course, or let's just take the Moai. Like somebody signs up for the Moai and they're paying $1 a month. And then in another alternate reality, that same person signs up for the Moai, same class, same community, same accountability structure, but they're paying $10 a month or $30 a month or $100 a month. How much more seriously are they going to take their change? It's the same thing. So from that perspective, you charging them is actually, you're doing a service to them by saying, hey, this is the barrier, or this is the gateway, this is the minimum amount that you need to spend for us as a company, and for this as a platform, for you to have access to this platform, because we demand that our customers take their habit change this seriously. And I know that I've spoken to a lot of coaches about this, so like life coaches and people like that in an industry that's there's no regulations for what to charge, right? There's no like standard life coaching fee. Like there's all kinds of stuff going out there. And there's some life coaches that charge $50 an hour. There's some life coaches that charge $10,000 an hour. Yes, you could probably argue that if a life coach is consistently charging $10,000 an hour and actually making a living and having repeat customers paying that kind of money, that person is probably pretty fucking prodigious at what they do. And that's amazing. And there's skill involved in all that. But I think a lot of it is just deciding what am I worth and how am I willing to show up because I'm charging this much. So I think when you charge more within reason, obviously, and you're being honest with yourself and you're not just taking this analogy and running with it to la la land, but when you charge the right, appropriate high amount, everybody's accountability increases. You as the provider of the service show up differently. Now you're charging an amount that you take seriously in terms of, I really want to make sure that people get the most out of this. And then the people that are paying are going to show up differently because they have skin in the game.
Yeah, man, you really I think you articulated exactly what I was struggling to say. Like that's so perfect. So that's kind of what was in my head. Like I wasn't able to say it, but I think that's the problem with nonprofits. The perceived value is so little because people are not paying for it. They may be providing the same service. And that's kind of why I wanted to charge money. Exactly what you said. Like when you charge money, people just show up differently. And for a lot of these things, like accountability is just what matters. Like people pay for gyms and coaches, and just because they paid, then they'll take it seriously. So I definitely think of my role here as accountability as a service. Like that's essentially what my product is, and just like kind of thinking of that in a more direct way. Like I hope that like people will like see that and react to it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think your product is that, plus there's the charity component. And I would even say, I mean, not to turn this into like a product development meeting, but just an idea I had, like, you start off with the free model and the charity and everything. And then, once you upgrade to that tier, now the donation can just be towards the charity, right? It's like, then you can incentivize so that people actually succeeding in their habits creates more donation for the charity, right? Like maybe the company says, if 80x percentage of people pass this training or this whatever community or course that we're doing, then the company is going to pledge like a prorated amount to that charity. And you can completely change. And I think just getting clear about like how we started this conversation about what is the alignment of the company and what are the incentives. And I think there's so much opportunity, man. I'm so excited for you and the Moai because like you said, people pay for accountability. Like I have a personal trainer that I've been working with remotely, and it's completely changed the game because I have somebody there checking in on me, help me answering my questions about form and different things like that. And that's absolutely worth my money as opposed to if I were to just go try to do it myself and, probably like lose motivation because there's no one there. I think we underestimate the power of community and how important it is to feel like somebody is there witnessing us in our journey, in our process.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think like friends ideally kind of play this role, but sometimes it's just not enough. And I think sometimes you need a stranger. You need someone who like can't cut you slack, right?
Right. Someone who's not going to just play to your biases or tell you what you want to hear because they don't want to be confrontational. I mean, this is why people have therapists too. It's nice to have an objective third party. And I think, like you said, the role of friends does traditionally play this role. But I think, again, the reason why I think something like the Moai is so valuable and so needed is because once we get out of college, or, some people, if you work in a job in a company, you can have coworkers and friends like that. But especially now with the pandemic and as things get more and more remote, we don't have that built-in social network that we did from K through 12 and college and grad school or whatever. Like once you get into the adult world, it is really up to you to take the initiative to build those connections. And, as things get more and more remote, and we saw what can happen during a global pandemic where people can't meet up in person, I think seeking out that community of like-minded people is really important. Like I was talking to Phil, my guest on the last show of this podcast, about how like when you're in school, right, you're always bonding with people regardless of what period in your life based on a shared set of values or experiences. So in school, that shared set of values is really not that sophisticated. It's just because you happen to all be in the same place. Like, and that's where you're bonding. Or in high school, it's because like you're all in science class together. And college, maybe you join a fraternity. I know this is the case for me. A lot of those friendships were just based around drinking and partying. And it's like, and that was cool at that point in my life, but there wasn't a lot of substance there. So then when I graduated, I didn't really keep in touch with most of those people. And when I do see them, it's kind of, we just revert back to our like that version of ourselves, because that's the only way we know how to relate to each other and witness each other, unless we've taken the effort or had the serendipity to develop into the kinds of people that bond over new things. And so I think with the Moai, it's so beautiful because you have this ability to connect with people on a shared value that is actually intentional. It's not just the result of your circumstances, like where you went to school or what you majored in. It's actually something that you're choosing and, like you said, voting with your dollar, showing up for and volunteering for. So yeah, I think that it's a great concept, man.
Yeah, thank you. That's also one of the reasons I wanted to focus on the community aspect, because I felt like, I mean, a problem that I knew I was going to solve, or I knew I wanted to solve after I left, was this whole, the proliferation of, I think, like social media and smartphones that I think has really like eroded community. And I think it's distanced people actually. But at the end of the day, the internet is like, and it's an amoral tool, right? It can be used for good or for bad. And I wanted to use it in a way that brings people together along an axis that's actually positive and productive. And I thought this was like a really cool way to do that. So that's definitely like, I think that's part of the reason why I created it in the first place. It's cool that you caught on to that.
Yeah, beautiful, man. I just wanted to close this off by asking you the same question that I ask all my guests at the end of each show. And this is, just stream of consciousness. No need to overthink it. First thing that comes to your mind. And the question is, what makes you feel the most free?
I think it's the idea that the world is just like an open place and you can really do whatever you want. Everything around us is made up. It's a made up structure. It's a made up label. Steve Jobs has this really beautiful quote. When you realize the world is built by people no smarter than you, your life will just never be the same after, because you realize that you can change it, you can influence it, you could put stuff out into the world and it can react to it. So I think, yeah, just the fact that the world is a wide open place and you can do whatever you want.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah, just the freedom to realize possibility in everything.
Yeah.
Beautiful, man. This is such a great conversation. It's so good to have you on the show. I really appreciate that we connected at that party last year so serendipitously. Yeah, man, definitely looking forward to everything that's coming up for you. And for everyone listening out there, where can people learn more about your work, the Moai, anything else that you're working on? Where can we send people?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're more interested in my journey or my decision to quit Google, I wrote this essay about my master plan when I left. It's on suketk.com. Ashish, you could probably link it in the show notes.
Yep.
And if you're interested in the Moai, you can go to themoai.org, themoai.org.
Perfect. Sounds amazing, man.
Thanks for having me, Ashish.
Of course. Thanks so much for coming on the show, brother. Yeah, stay warm out there and I'll see you soon. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of the Sacred Giggle podcast, this conversation with Suket Karnawat. If you'd like to learn more about him, you can check out his beautiful article about why he left Google in the show notes. You can check out themoai.org. That's themoai, MOAI.org, which is also linked in the show notes to check out more about his platform. And if you've been liking what you've been hearing week after week on this show, it would mean the world if you can subscribe, follow, and rate the podcast wherever you're listening to this. It really means the world to me, and I can't wait to keep bringing you guys enlightening, awakened conversations. Lots of love. Talk to you guys soon.